It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Freeman Michaels with my guest co-host today, Catherine Woodward-Thomas. For those of you who don't know Catherine, she is a friend of this show's. Of course, she's been on the show before, but she is best known as the best-selling author of Calling in the One. She's a licensed psychotherapist and the co-creator and co-leader of the Feminine Power Transformative Courses for Women, which is quite a thing, Catherine. You've got over 100,000 women now participating in your Feminine Power Workshop. So, Catherine, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Freeman. It's really fun to be here with you today.
It is awesome because we're going to talk a lot today about men and women, where we are today as an evolving species, and we have a wonderful guest who will be joining us shortly, Jeff Brown, who has done some beautiful work. We'll talk about him in a minute. But you know what I think is funny, just to lead this off, is this morning I picked you up to come into the studio, and you got in the car. This is very typical. And after our greeting, I said, "How should I get to the freeway?" And you said, "Well, go down this street and that street and so forth." And I started going, and then I decided, for no real reason, to take my own route.
Right.
Which was
in my neighborhood, you decided to take your route, right? I know.
And so, because I knew where the freeway was. Now, see, men always do this. We rationalize. I know where the freeway is. I could just go this way, which I did. I went down a particular street that got me right to the freeway with no on-ramp.
Right, exactly.
That's classic.
That was cute.
So we sort of set up this day kind of perfectly. I stepped in the hole, as it were.
There you go. And I knew it as it was happening, and I just chose my battles in that moment. I just thought,
this
I'm
is
just going to let Freeman do his Freeman thing.
This is a battle-worn woman. You've been through it before. My wife is going to listen to the show and just crack up
and
laughing
laugh.
because it goes on often.
Right.
So I guess what that speaks to is that there are a lot of ways that we have, at least I have, bought into gender roles and played them out to my own detriment. I mean, I know sometimes that I'm stepping in the hole, and I still do it. In some very real way, it's like I'm hanging on to something which is less and less valuable. It's a law of diminishing returns, that a lot of the ways that I have learned, been taught, programmed to view myself as a man and to sort of act in the world ain't working for me.
Yeah.
But it's hard to give up.
It's confusing.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to give up, too, because we don't know where we're going yet.
Mm.
We don't know what the vision is yet. So it's very confusing. First of all, I just want to say I'm so excited to be here with you and talking about this. I'm excited to have Jeff here with us, too. I work with my teaching partner, Claire Zamet. We, as you mentioned, have about 100,000 women in our Feminine Power global community, and we're with women all the time.
Yes.
So it's such a treat for me to be here and talking about the evolution of the relationships between men and women and where we're going and what's happening on the scene that's trying to get us there. And one of the things that we were starting to touch on just a few minutes ago that we want to share with the listeners here now too is this whole thing that Hannah Rosen, with her article through the Atlantic, The End of Men.
Yeah.
And the dislocation that men are feeling a lot. And and so we're kind of in this place where my concern has been, and some of the things that Hannah Rosen's talking about are the top 10 the 10 industries that are really up and coming in the next decade. 7 of them are led by women. They're really dominated by women, and I think it's 3 women to every 2 men are graduating from colleges in America. So there's a lot happening that is really kind of catapulting women to leadership positions, and I think the men are very dislocated. I think our concern has been that, we don't want to just flip it. We don't want to go from now, the masculine was valued over the feminine was always devalued. We don't want to just flip it. Now the feminine's valued and the masculine is being devalued.
And there's no winners in the battle of the sexes. There's no winners in a war, and so when we make it about men and women and equality and women coming back and men going there, and like it's a losing proposition. The opportunity is to reevaluate how we have identified ourselves individually within our gender, recognize what's working for us, and recognize where there might be opportunities to grow into a new sense of ourselves. And this is interesting because what it, in my mind, speaks to is some vital capacities that women have had more of an opportunity to grow, if you will,
for sure,
than men.
Yeah.
Men have really been taught a particular way of operating. It's an operating system, if you will, that's flawed. And it's fine. It's a developmental stage. It's not to say, go ahead.
You know what it is? Let's not even call it flawed. Let's just call it insufficient for where we are and what needs to happen in our world.
Well, that's where I was going. Okay. I was actually going to say that it was a developmental stage. Like, it was appropriate for the time in the past.
Hey, I love laptops and lattes.
Yeah.
I love all that the masculine has afforded, in terms of comfort and privilege, and I like air conditioning. All of the consciousness of what the masculine has really brought in has been exceptional and extraordinary, because we're all living with the blessing of the masculine. But we're talking now about something needs to evolve, the integration of the feminine back in.
Right.
And that means, women and men working together in partnership.
Yeah.
We're coming out of thousands of years of women being in support positions to men, and we have a lot of those primitive instincts and urges. So a lot of folks are trying to kind of clear the field so that we can create something new.
Beautiful.
Right. And
Beautiful.
and so one of the things we wanted to mention was the Dear Woman.
Well, that's what we want to get to, because this is a piece that Jeff... so Dear Women came out first. You're right. Or maybe, I don't know which came out
Jeff's
first.
came out first.
Oh, it did? I didn't know that. Okay.
Jeff's came out first. So Jeff Brown created... We're going to have Jeff on in just a second, but Jeff Brown created Apologies to the Divine Feminine, and somehow it found its way. One of my students sent it to me. And the moment I read it, I just had tingles from head to toe, because he so spoke to my lived experience. It's gorgeous. So we're going to get into that and have him share about that.
Yeah.
There was a group of men that came after Jeff,
right?
Gay Hendricks and Arjuna,
right?
And they created the Dear Woman video,
right?
Which also opened up a very big discussion. I think they've had like 700,000. More than 700,000 hits on YouTube.
Well, it's still moving. I mean, it's still out there. It's viral. So
is.
I see it. It sort of pops into my world, as it were, my viral world. Every once in a while, it pops up that someone sends it to me or posts it or whatever. So, yeah, it's still going.
Yeah, so there's mixed feelings I had about that.
I have mixed feelings as well. We share that. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's jump into it. So let me introduce Jeff Brown. So Jeff is a former criminal lawyer and psychotherapist, who wrote a beautiful book called Soul Shaping, A Journey of Self-Creation. I want to mention something about this, too. I read so many books because I prepare these shows, and I very rarely keep going after the show is done. And I had a digital copy of this, and I ordered a actual book copy on Amazon the other day. Yeah, this is the book I'm reading right now, and I'll speak to why that is so in a minute here. But he recently published this article that you're speaking of, which is the Apologies to the Divine Feminine, and his organization called Soul Shaping at soulshaping.com is really about creating a forum to discuss issues such as this. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Freeman.
I'm so thrilled you're here. Listen, I want to first tell you something. There's a quality in your writing, both in the book and in this article, that really speaks to me, and I'll tell you specifically what it is. You talk personally. You speak of your own experience, and you speak of your own confusion, which invites me to be confused. And I think, and this is, again, going back to the idea of how we formulate our sense of self as men based on our programming, I love I don't know. Now, growing up, I was taught as a man you were supposed to know, I don't know, you're supposed to know all kinds of things you couldn't possibly know. Sexually, you're supposed to know everything just by osmosis. No one taught you that you were supposed to be, have answers before you could even have a question. And what I love about what you've done in this beautiful, beautifully written, heartfelt book is you've opened up a dialogue from a very sincere place in both the book and in this article. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I mean, it's nice to hear that from a man. I mean, most of the support for my work has really emanated from women, and it's nice to begin to connect in with men with this work. When I wrote the apologies, even then, most of the response was probably 95% of the response was from women, and the more recent piece, The Awakening Man, I'm thinking I'm getting about 30% positive responses from men, so which is very satisfying and definitely indicates that there's some kind of opening happening that even wasn't happening for us last autumn. It's really beautiful.
Great. Well deserved.
It's time.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree that about Jeff's book, which is wonderful, and wanted to almost thank you, Jeff, for articulating what you're articulating in the apology to the divine feminine, and just for people who are listening who don't know, haven't had the opportunity to listen. I just wanted to read a couple of things that you share. You start out by saying, "I apologize for my inability to distinguish the benevolent warrior from the heartless warrior, a reflection of my own confusion dealing with the battlefields of yore. When I opened my heart too wide, I was vulnerable to attack from warring factions. I was conditioned to believe that I had to stay rigid, focused, prepared for any eventuality in the desire to protect myself and others from attack. But I went too far, closed too tight, and eradicated the bridge between our hearts. And I am seeing this now, and I am sorry." And the piece goes on in this very soulful, very real, raw, personal way. Where
That's the distinction. I want to bring that out right away,
Yeah.
and then I'll throw this to you, Jeff, to talk a bit about what inspired you to write this. But what is the difference for me, why I really resonate with Jeff's piece and why I struggle some, though I think, Gay Hendricks and those involved had the best intentions, and it's a good piece. There's nothing wrong with it necessarily. But what makes Jeff so important is that it's
There's a
personal.
couple of things a little bit off about it.
I know.
We're
We're going to get into that too. We'll get into that. Just
With all due respect.
that you personalize it, Jeff, and that you really, in the car driving, Catherine and I were sort of saying it's sort of group process 101 that you use I statements. And so part of my struggle with the Dear Women is it's a lot of we statements, we as men. And I want to speak for myself as a man. And that's what I enjoy so much and why I can relate to yours is it's so personal.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of problems with the video. They had asked me to come in and help to re-edit the Conscious Men's Manifesto that sources that. And one of the original problems, I had the exact same problem with it. And the other problem I had with it, and I think for whatever reason, whatever came through me that day with the apologies, I really wanted to not only apologize, but I wanted to contextualize. Because my experience has been, and this was probably more intuitive than anything, that women respond certainly to apology, but they've heard a lot of apologies before. What they also respond to is the desire to understand the context for our behavior. It's like part of the relational matrix so that we can understand that we were in something together.
That's it.
Rather than completely divided. And because, not to say women didn't suffer more, but men living with armored hearts, not moving from the heart outward, really not being in the moment with a closed heart suffered also. And I think the way forward, at least in terms of apology, is helping people to understand, all of us to understand sociologically and personally what we've all experienced together,
Well, and if I can just also say that the way that you've done that, Jeff, was very moving to me because you actually named the impact that that's had on me. And I'm going to speak personally because you wrote it personally and it's collective. But as a woman, I felt like you actually not only got what I've been through, but you gave language to things that I hadn't even named yet in my own experience.
What happened to me is that I really was a feisty trial law guy, Mm-hmm. And I had this love experience that I wrote about in Soul Shaping that really cracked me open. So I had an experience of receptivity and the suffering and the heart of receptivity mm-hmm. that I knew nothing about in this incarnation, really. And then I would work with my bubby, my Jewish grandmother. She was like a depth charge for my own expansion. And I would go to the apartment and I would sit with her. And when I was young, she annoyed me, She wanted to feed me. She wanted to take care of me. She asked me how I was feeling. I was more interested in sharing my egoic gratifications, all the things I'd achieved with her. She wasn't interested. She just wanted to make sure I had lunch, And for the longest time, I thought she was crazy, like my girlfriends that wanted commitments, and all they thought about, they were upset because I didn't call them. They were crazy. But eventually, they stopped looking crazy, and I would see her sitting in her little chair with the old booby phone on her right leg and this little phone number book on her left leg. And beside everybody's name and number was the birth date of everybody. So she would go through that book every day and make sure everybody got a phone call. And I kept watching that and feeling the annoyance with not understanding that. And then by the time she died, the end of her life, I really began to understand what a courageous path that was. That this open-hearted path. My grandfather, who would go to the racetrack every time they had a fight because he didn't want to live in the feelings, started to look like he was walking easy streak by comparison to her. And it just became clearer and clearer to me that the more enlightened path was the enheartened path, and that really the divine feminine just understood that much more deeply than we do.
The point you make, which is that it isn't that we're in it together, and that it's a lose-lose. The idea that again that there are winners in the battle of the sexes. There are no winners, and you and I, because I know we're close in age, were born into an era. Well, all three of us, I should say, were born into an era of profound confusion, where there were mixed messages. There were people burning bras, and there were women's studies all of a sudden, and there was this battle going on, and in the middle of it, these kids are growing up with real confusion. There was the sexual revolution, and what do I do with that? And so coming out of that, I think the owning of your experience, and I'll step up for myself and say my owning of my experience, I'm sure for Catherine it's the same, so that we really can begin to meet each other anew. Meet each other from a depth of meeting where it's not what you have to be so that I get to continue to tell my story. It's who you are that I can really go into what you're talking about and experience it and relate to it and allow for it, so that there's this opportunity for all of us to grow. Yeah,
I mean, I think seeing one another is fundamental to the transformation, And I think there was that whole period when the feminist movement started, and they were rightfully expressing. I mean, it absolutely was perfect what they were saying about their experience, and they were establishing rights, and we were moving forward in that way. But there was a way in which we didn't all see one another on that deeper, more vulnerable level. Like, what kind of suffering did we experience? Men got their backups, For me, when I wrote this, I didn't feel on any level like I was being vilified. And for some reason, that gave me permission to express it from a volitional and genuine place inside of me.
Absolutely.
And for me also, from a non-defensive perspective, to see the other, to imagine the experience of woman, to understand the suffering my booby had sitting there at that chair alone while my grandfather distracted from reality, and to really be able to feel into it non-defensively. And I think if we can create that kind of environment where we're expressing our rightful dissatisfaction and suffering in a non-defensive framework, I think that's the way we begin to move forward, because then we can see one another in real terms.
Yeah. We need to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to go to what Catherine sort of initiated, which is moving forward. Where do we go from here? So we're going to take a quick break, but stay with us. We'll be right back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with my guest co-host, Catherine Woodward Thomas. We are talking today to Jeff Brown, who is an incredible author and thought leader, the author of Soul Shaping, A Journey of Self-Creation, and the author of an incredible article entitled Apologies to the Divine Feminine, From a Warrior in Transition. And that brings us to something, Catherine, you were talking about, which is the transition. And we have a sense of where we've been, but imagining or envisioning, I should say, perhaps, a sense of where we're going is the topic that you had mentioned earlier. And I want to go back to that, Catherine.
Right. Oh, there's so much to say, isn't there? Oh, my goodness.
Where do you want to start?
Oh, my gosh. Okay, 30 seconds go. Where are we going? But I think, truthfully, the Jeff's piece and the piece, Dear Women, that these other men are bringing forward are really an attempt kind of to start this conversation moving in this direction.
Yeah.
And what I see them trying to do is really clear the field. between us, so that and so we're talking about all the things that are messy between us. Where, I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, I just said that's right.
Yeah. So where I saw that, for me, the Dear Woman video kind of was missing the mark is that they're not necessarily speaking to the things that are still in the field right now, immediate. It wasn't named properly well enough. Jeff is really nailing it. But so it's not so much an apology for what happened in the lineage that needs to happen. It's a naming of what's still in the space that's unconscious.
That's right.
Right, that's not evolved yet. It's all the primitive ways that we're still operating unconsciously with these motivations that are kind of squirrely, that are kind of outside of our self-image. You know, we think, so for instance, like, and those are the things that the women need to say too to the men. So I think the conversation is like, how do we make an amends in a way that's going to clear the field really, and enable us to begin to create what needs to happen for us to be able to step into partnership in the way that really needs to happen, for us to co-create the future of our world in the way that really needs to happen right now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it feels like there's a few things that we certainly have to do that, and I mean, a number of groups have sprung up that are where people are actually working with the apology, and people are using it in therapy as a therapeutic tool with that intention. But you know, I also wrote a piece called "The Awakening Man," very simple piece recently, because what was missing for me in my own inner world was trying to clarify where it is that I was going. You know, it was one thing for me to recognize what wasn't okay and to begin to see and understand the impact on other. But I felt quite confused, and maybe, Freeman, you have this experience as well, in terms of clarifying what does the awakening man look like, and how does what is the healthy model for the masculine that we're striving toward that is benevolently intended, but that still incorporates something called masculinity, and how is that distinct from the healthy feminine? And I think we need to both apologize and begin to really define and clarify what we're striving towards, because people we don't know are really, really absolutely confused about it.
Well, and thank you, though. Thank you for I don't know, because there's an empowered I don't know, which is very appropriate this moment in time. And the empowered I don't know is I don't know, but I'm willing to find out.
Yeah.
You know, there's I don't know, which is a defense mechanism. We say, I don't know. You know, that's a cop-out.
An abdication of responsibility.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a sincere I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. And it's interesting because language-wise, I'm calling it integration. So for me personally, again, that's all I can really speak to, is I recognize the imbalance within myself, that there's lots of things I'm doing without a sense of why I'm doing them. They're missing a context, a deeper meaning, a deeper sense of what's the greater purpose in what I'm doing.
Right.
And I think you and I even spoke about this on the phone. You said, and I'm going to blow it, but something to the effect of, I bump up against this, specifically I think it was in business, all the time, where it's almost like a default operating system, and I know it's there, and it doesn't mean it just goes away, because there's a part of me that knows that isn't working. It's what we've had to work with, and it's not gone just because there's a part of us that knows that it isn't really working. How we get from there to something new is a process, right?
Well, I mean, I think we're at the very this dialogue. We're pioneers already, you know, and that's partly why we're not exactly clear yet. We're just at the beginning of working our way through the brush. You know, this bridge from survivalism as an orienting, defining principle to authenticity, moving from the essential self outward. I think we're just at the beginning of even thinking about that, you know. So when I go out into business, I'm still encountering a survivalist landscape, you know, where my personality adapts to the structures around me in order to make living to survive, you know. That's radically different from moving from sacred purpose outward, letting my personality be a direct reflection of my core essential self. I mean, you know, this isn't just a gender reality. This is a reality for all of us, really.
Yeah,
you know, and to the extent that, for example, you know, I fundamentally don't believe that men will start behaving differently until the world is a physically, fundamentally safer place. Because I think we just fall. And I saw it at 9/11. I had left Harbin Hot Springs. I'd been naked for 2 weeks. I'd done so much body work. My heart was absolutely wide open. 9/11 happened. I was right away back to hypervigilant warrior, thinking, how ridiculous is it? I'm going to write this silly esoteric book about my spiritual journey, and I was driving up and down Bathurst Street looking for terrorists. I mean, that's how close it is to the surface of the male consciousness.
That's brilliant. That illustration right there is absolutely, Jeff, thank you. That's how quickly we revert too.
Right on, ready to rock.
Yeah, and there's an interesting neuroscience piece. I mean, it's just when we're in fight or flight, cortisol is being released through the adrenal glands into our bloodstream, and it blocks your ability to think clearly. I mean, that's its job. So, we do default to these things. So the kinds of practices and the kinds of ways that we keep coming back to our own edge. And you and I talked about this, Catherine, in the car.
Well, it's really having a developmental perspective to
Yes.
our own inner experience. It's not being like and believing everything we feel or just assuming that every thought we have is true. It's being able to step back from our own experience, understand that we're, collectively in this evolutionary process, and we have a responsibility as a transitional generation to make things more well and conscious and really the challenge of our time. We're not up to it yet. We have to actually evolve ourselves.
Well, the challenge of our time from that, what you just said, Catherine, is to be able to hold dynamic complexity. And this is, Jeff, what you were saying over the phone, is that, look, I know this part of me exists. And you're saying it now in the sense that you're acknowledging the part of you that snaps too. So I think the real challenge is a consciousness that holds paradox, that holds dynamic complexity.
That's right. And make our armoring and adaptive mechanisms more conscious.
That's
so
right.
It's not that I may have to put on a sales face to get through the day, but at least I know the difference because there's some contrast in my experience between moving from an essential self versus moving from an adapted self, so that when the moment is over, when I don't have to rely on that manifestation anymore, I know there's somewhere else to go and to come back to the core and emanate from that place outward and then go back into adaptation. I think we're just at that stage now. We're just at the beginning of this burgeoning awareness of something called the essential self. So we really do, like you say, in a very complex and refined way, have to learn how to hold everything together at once.
So it's interesting. I mean, just organically, we started the conversation by talking about what needs to evolve in an interpersonal way between men and women. But the conversation is always going to go into our own, each of us becoming much more aware of our, not just of our feelings or our needs, but it's also of our motivation for things.
And it's personal. The idea that it's personal. The collective follows the personal. And so often, look, this is, again, I'm not diminishing that video, The Dear Women, but when we try to skip ahead to fixing the collective, it is often an expression of a shadow piece, the part inside of us that isn't willing to own it for ourselves. At the end of the day, if we own it for ourselves, and I think all three of us know this, fundamentally, that we watch our world match up with that. We watch it.
Do you know what I'd like to add too is that seeing our own personal experience in the larger context.
That's it.
Because in a postmodern culture that we're all inside of, we're all so kind of like everything's just my truth, my experience. We've really veered towards narcissism to the extreme, and we forget the context.
Well, that's a good point. I was actually speaking more about owning everything, but you're right, that it actually works both ways.
So we want to be able to really get, like, this is what I'm feeling. So for women, for instance, the desire as a woman that's so uncool and unhip to ever, say out loud, but I want a big, strong man to take care of me, right? That desire. Women still have that desire, but they're not allowed to say it, and it might even be outside of our self-image. And to be able to just be clear and to own that and to see that as impersonal, not to go into a place of personal shame. Go, oh, there it is. That's, the lineage, the thousands of years that we've been inside of. That's what I was raised with. There's the Cinderella thing, looking for Prince Charming. Yep. It's not personal. It's ours to evolve. That's the relationship we need to have with it.
Right on. And I'm not allowed to say that I want a big, strong woman to take care of me.
No.
Or even that you want a woman to take care of, Jeff. I mean, that there's a part of me that has my daughter is just about to turn 6. And I can't tell you how much I like picking her up off the pavement and caring for her when she's fallen down. It feeds me on the most deep and profound soul level, and that she looks up at me and says something with "daddy" in the sentence.
Well, I think that, but I think we all feel that way about our kids. Those of us who have kids, it's more about your wife. Do you feel that way with your wife?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think with my wife, there are so many ways that we have to really work to find moments where we step into something authentically. and it's not dragging with it either a reaction to our experience in the past or representing unconsciously our experience from the past. So to be in those authentic moments is something her and I are working for consciously all the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of a feedback back and forth. How's that working for you? How's that working for you? Because we are in an uncharted territory. No question about it.
Right. So we're making these things conscious, and I think, Jeff, you really, helped us tremendously in being able to name some of these things. And the thing that I love about your piece too is you're not idealizing women. You're not like saying, oh, okay, well, the masculine's bad and the feminine is the savior of the world. And unfortunately, it's one of the things that I thought was a little unsophisticated about the Dear Woman piece is this idealization that's going on. So there's a lot more to begin to engage around then what women need to really take responsibility for. In not idealizing women. It's like getting that this has been a co-created dynamic, even the ways that we have colluded in these very odd, covert ways with our own victimization, which, my teaching partner, Claire Zem, and I have really pushed into this and really looked at, why have we colluded with our own oppression? And we think it has something to do with not wanting to take responsibility.
I think that's right on.
Right?
Yeah.
So for really, we really step into equality with men, and we give up the fantasy that men know and we don't. We have to give up the illusion of safety, and we have to actually become responsible for the state of our world and start participating at a whole new level. And so, I would love to push into another time, like what we women need to bring to the table and start to fess up to and really name accurately in the lived experience of men.
Jeff, I see a dialogue here, don't you?
Yeah, we go on forever. It's
That's the issue. Unfortunately, we're in radio time. Listen, before we let you go, Jeff, we need to know what's going on for you. We didn't get much time to talk about the film stuff, which I'm really excited for you. You've got a film I know that's coming out soon that was meant to be a kind of quicker project, but it turned into a true labor of love and an expression of something really profound for you. So before we let you go, can you tell us a little bit about that project?
It's been more a labor of hate, Freeman, actually.
All right.
To be honest with you about that. Yeah, the film is called Karmageddon. It's a film about my connection to a spiritual teacher and chanter named Bhagavan Das, who was made famous in Ram Dass's book Be Here Now, and it includes interviews with Ram Dass and Sean Korn and David Life and a lot of very brilliant people trying to understand really the connection between the spiritual experience and the experience of the psycho-emotional. I mean, in Soul Shaping, I don't distinguish any of that, but we explore those questions, and we explore the question of the guru, and it's quite something. It's a very emotionally charged documentary, and we're almost finished it. We're looking forward to a festival in 2012.
When that comes out, we'd like to have you back.
I'm happy to send you links. That'd be great. I'd love that.
Yeah, no, because I think, and we can't talk about it now because we're on a different topic, but the whole guru thing is really worth talking about, and it's an important stage of development, but one that's evolving. So, Jeff, the website for you, again, is Soulshaping. Right, soulshaping.com. We invite the listeners to check out what Jeff is doing. He is a remarkable voice, an incredibly honest and authentic man showing up, complete with his confusion. And I highly, highly, highly recommend his book again called Soul Shaping, A Journey of Self-Creation. Thank you, Jeff, for spending the time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
And for those of you listening, stay tuned because we'll be right back after this short break here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Freeman Michaels with my guest co-host, Catherine Woodward Thomas. Catherine, that was brilliant.
Wasn't that fun?
Jeff is a really wonderful man. I'm really grateful that you introduced us.
There's something in the connection that you have with Jeff. It was fascinating to just listen to you speaking and connecting. There's a real heart connection between you.
Yeah.
Both of you, real deep resonance.
I long for that connection with men because if I'm really honest, so much of what I was trained to do kept a distance or a barrier between me and other men. And, some of it is homophobia, that if I'm too close, then, we might be gay and all of that kind of confusion, as well as that I was taught to compete. So men were the enemy. You know, that we were competing for something.
Can I say something about competition?
Please.
Because it's, you know, in all these conversations around how we're going to evolve, competition comes up as like the primary one that's really getting a rap. You know, it's like, oh, we got to evolve beyond competition and, you know, bad, wrong. But I think it's competition at what level of development?
Totally. Because there's constructive competition.
There's noble competition.
Totally.
If you think about, you know, just even so many industries have been because people have been striving together to break the barrier of what we know, and that we kind of push our capacities by striving with each other for something.
And we push each other, which we can do. I mean, one of my closest friends and I, we compete all the time, but it's a really constructive way. Like, he really pushes me to go farther.
So I mean, that's the question then with men. You know, like what's the evolved way to express that competitive impulse?
Yeah,
you know, with each other.
And I'm going to go again with I don't know. No, well, that's true in part. I mean, it's something that we discover. Look, it's a feminine quality, and when I say feminine quality, men and women alike can have these qualities. In fact, we need masculine and feminine. It's the yin and the yang. It's the balancing.
That's
part
right.
of what I'm working on is reintegrating aspects of my. I don't know if you want to even call it feminine side, because there are all sides of me that have this discovery component.
Right.
So for me as a man, again, not only am I supposed to know it all, there's no reverence for discovery. There's no reverence for it.
That's the devaluing of the feminine
That's
in the
it.
culture at large.
That's it.
That you're going to value certainty over uncertainty.
Yeah. So
And,
to answer your question, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out, is something that becomes this beautiful space between us, where we show up with an intention, because sometimes that's all we've got, which is to meet over something, to connect, to create, if you will, the space between us that then gets filled.
Well, I love just, you know, the connection that you and Jeff just had, and I really wanted to encourage that dialogue. It made me, you know, just wonder if Jeff needs to be even working and having more dialogues just for men. And because I just saw how it lit you up to be able to dialogue with him, and really just kind of got you and where you're going and what your, you know, gifts are to contribute to the world.
This idea of being met, you have it with Claire. You have it with other women, that we are met. And something we said when we were coming is that also one of the things is being met by men in a capacity that isn't romantic, though that's wonderful too, but just where we have female friends. My female friends are such a gift to me, you know, and that's something that's tricky too, that we've lost that, or I don't know. Maybe it's not even lost. Maybe it hasn't been discovered yet.
Exactly, I think that's probably more accurate. That
So
we haven't yet evolved to that extent. But you know, one of the things that we're talking about, these primitive urges, these primitive instincts. You know, and I think we were leaving off with just kind of touching on how women are feeling so. You know, that the rap is that, you know, we're victimized, and a lot of our literature that's like distinguishing the dynamics in the culture is really written from this very, very victimized perspective. And it's not that we haven't been victimized.
Right.
But there has to be a willingness to engage the ways that we ourselves have colluded with that and participated in that, and participate now.
What's the payoff? What's the payoff, Catherine?
What's the payoff?
We always have to ask that. What's the payoff for playing the victim, and what's the projection? Because listen, I get this a lot, where women take a stance and there's a projection on me to play the perpetrator, and I don't want to do it.
Right.
So what happens is this: pretty quickly, I have to decide if I'm going to match that energetically, and I usually don't. What happens is the person goes right by me. They go out, they leave the dialogue or the interaction with me, and they go find the perpetrator. So the truth is, on some very real level, they're not willing to give up their position, because on some level it's working for them. So it's interesting, because that then becomes the barrier.
Well, and you know, we are our own guinea pigs. Those of us having these conversations, naming the questions, we're living this experience. It's not theoretical. So in my own lived experience, you know, here I am with a wonderful teaching partner, Claire Zamet, and we are co-leading this community of 100,000 women, and I even now have to make conscious the part of me that doesn't want to be responsible at this level, that somehow wants to find someone else that I can support. It's like in my DNA, I just want to like really support someone else. And I really saw it. I was invited into this wonderful group of leaders, evolutionary leaders, and it's a group that Deepak Chopra put together. It's about 50, 60 of us, and we're creating different projects in the world and stuff. And I'm on the team, one of the core, committee teams that's steering the organization. And I noticed in myself that I want to go on there with this, with the men and the women, and I want to start almost like serving the ideas that other people are having.
Right.
Right. I don't want to actually. So I've seen that. I've had to become really conscious and make different choices.
That's it.
And learn different skills, because I don't know how to think together with men yet in order to bring forth that which is new and never been before.
And the consciousness is the capacity to see both sides. It's an expanded awareness where you can see both sides of you and even see it playing out and say, wait a minute. I know this is a story that's already been written, so if I go down that path, we already know what the end is. Let me interrupt that and take a different route. But it's still an honoring. I mean, I don't think that we just, that we deem it bad or we push it aside. There's a part of me that wants to. That's often how I describe it. I describe these as aspects of myself. So I would say I have two minds about it. There's a part of me that wants to, dominate and control, but there's another part of me that recognizes that there's an opportunity here for a collaborative experience.
And I think what inspires us to identify with the part of the self and to actually align with the part of the self that is more forward thinking, more going to create the new, and to give up the perks of the other, like, I get to avoid responsibility or whatever, is having a very wholesome motivation, truthfully.
Beautiful.
To be in service to something greater than our own egoic need.
That's fantastic. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
That this sense of vision and envisioning and a sense of purpose and meaning, like that this is something I'm committed to. And it's interesting because once we make that commitment, once we say this is something I want, one of those unknowns, right? This is something I want. Then we actually have this kind of test, if you will. Always. Is what I'm doing, saying, or even thinking in alignment with what I say I want, or is it not? And when it's not, look, it's an opportunity. We can look at our resistance. We can look at the payoff, what we were talking about before. That's
well, and that's great, and because it will, it's a constant course correct. Life is a constant course correct. It's like recognizing, almost like airplanes are. 97% of the time are off course, and that's kind of, I identify with
You're
that.
kidding me, right?
I think I'm off course 97% of the time. Like, okay, a little to the left, a little to the right.
That's one of those ones that always makes me nervous. I'm off course that much. No, but it's humbling in a very empowered way, not humbling in a self-deprecating way. To know that, wow. Okay, I've got so much work to do, but I'm grateful for that because it's, look, for me, go ahead.
Well, and it's one of the things we said on that I'd love to share with people too right now. It has to do with when you have a very big game, all of a sudden you're aware of all of your limitations and all of the areas you need to develop and all the ways you fall short. It's like, oh my gosh, the
it's
gap
amplified.
It's
Turn
so
up the volume.
Now, when I had a small game in life, when I was in my fantasy of what I was going to do one day, I thought I was pretty perfect.
Right.
I thought I had it all together.
Right.
Or, I had a very different kind of self-image. So it's actually, you have to be willing to give up your self-image and be in unknown territory.
Yeah. This is something to, when I'm in that moment, and it happens a lot these days because I'm upping my game. Truthfully, that's what's happening for me. Well, here's what happens. I got to get in touch with the part of me that feels like a fraud.
Yes,
I just get flushed with shame and guilt, and it comes in like a wave. And it's been very challenging for me to sit with that level of discomfort. That's my big... I've been doing yoga for about 3 years, and I'm no yogi. I barely bend still. But it's my relationship with discomfort. It's my relationship with these parts that I have seriously worked to avoid in my life.
Well, I just have so much respect for you for naming it. It's such a normal experience. I have had those feelings at various times too. And you know what I have found is that when you're really in service to something, it's almost like there's things just that never get really worked out. You just don't really have time for them anymore.
I
never really got over being a shy person. I'm actually a very shy person.
That's fantastic.
But it's like I don't have time in my schedule to be shy.
Yeah.
Something needs to happen. Something needs to be brought forth. Something needs to be facilitated.
But it's interesting because this is that little piece of hearing from. I'm hearing from the part of me that's shy. Right? That's
great.
it. I'm just hearing from it. And so what does that look like for me when I'm hearing from the part of me that doesn't know if I can do it, doesn't know if I'm good enough or smart enough or fast enough or strong enough or rah, 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 rah. It comes in. And then I have an opportunity to integrate, to become, to actually, this is the way I language it, to actually pull that part of me close. And when I do that, it's very interesting. So I have an illustration for this. I said this to you before that I'm the people pleaser. I want everyone to like me. Mm-hmm. If I hold in my consciousness that part of me exists, I don't identify with it, but I relate to it when it comes up, then what happens is it tends not to leak out. Right. When I pretend like it doesn't exist, here's what it looks like. 2 ways. Defensive, I don't care if you like me, I don't care if you like me. Or please like me, please like me, please like me. That's the leaking out process.
Right. And how old is that part of you?
Yeah, well, there you go. I'll tell you right now, it's 43 because I've dragged it along from age 4 on, and it's still playing out today.
Well, it's like having the 4-year-old drive the car. It's like, no, you want the 4-year-old back in the back seat, buckled into the car seat.
What Barnett might call who's driving the bus? What part of me jumped to the driver's seat and is taking us down the road? Get that guy where he belongs. Let him fit in the back. He's there. Acknowledge that part of me, your shy part, my this part, come up.
That's great.
And yet make choices. This is consciousness. This is the awareness to hold all sides of us.
Yeah.
The integrity person
without shame.
Without shame.
Right.
Yeah.
And self-responsibility, like it's unacceptable to be like walking around like this and pulling on people for these old agendas. Because what's the cost of that to others? What's the cost of that in terms of our self-expression and what we're here to really create and contribute? The big cost. It'll eat up your whole life if you let it.
And yet, we all have those humbling moments where we go, oh my gosh, I'm doing it again. We do. I mean, Barnett and I just talked about this.
No,
he just came on and said, oh my goodness, I was leaking like mad the other day. Here's what happened. And I was every time one of us does it, I go, yeah, we leak out. That's what happens. So what do we do? How do we repair that? And repair is the language we love because it's both sides.
Yeah,
it's the light and the dark. It's the masculine and feminine. It's putting back together and integrating that disintegrated part of ourselves.
So sweet. Well, in the Feminine Power teaching that Claire and I created together, this is actually about the first power base of the feminine, which is all about our relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're talking about, this bringing in, this holding of the 4-year-old, this mentoring of the 4-year-old. What's really true about the value of Freeman's life and contribution and what you're here to create and what you were born for and, all of that, because from that deep part within your soul, like, yeah, I'm a work in progress.
That's right.
And there are many things to develop and learn, but I came here with these gifts to give, and I need to give them.
That's right. And it's not going to stop showing up. Our feedback system, our universe, will remind us, bring back to our mind again and again and again, specifically by the people we want to kill, the people we react to, And so the trick is that person's an idiot, and so am I. And so am I. That's the hardest part. I want to make it that person. I want to see it coming from them.
Right.
That's a bad bargain.
Yeah.
The minute that happens, indication.
Great.
Something for me needs to be looked at.
Yeah, so great. So this is so rich to be able to just share this conversation with you.
Well, I'm so thrilled that you came and did it today.
And to begin to talk about what needs to happen between the masculine and the feminine, because I think we're doing it in this moment. We're actually like really talking about our own internal development and our own awareness of motivation and what's really going on with us and where we're locating ourselves and what we're committed to creating. And
absolutely,
we have a big game on. We have a lot to create together.
My sense is this conversation isn't over, even though this show is just about over.
Okay.
I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had, and it's so interesting. We invited you again today. Barnett had a big voice in this and said, "We got to get Catherine in there. We got to get Catherine in there." Which I absolutely agreed, having spent some time with you, just hanging out, that you were really the right person to get in to talk about this thing. Before we let you go, let's get folks, because I know your workshop is amazing, the online community you've created. So let's give folks that website that you and Claire, the project you and Claire
the
have
Feminine
going.
Power Work,
Yeah.
femininepower.com. And would love to. We have actually a free audio which really goes into all the teaching points and starts to really empower people on how to be able to close the gap between the potentials they sense for their lives and their actual lived experience. So please feel free to go on femininepower.com and download that for yourself.
And the good news is Catherine will be back. So for those of you who enjoyed the show, keep tuning in. Who knows? She may pop back again and take one of our places for a day or so. And I know there's a book coming up. We won't talk about that now, but when it does, obviously you'll come back for that when your next book comes out. Her first book, Calling in the One, is a spectacular book. If you've never read that, I recommend you pick that up as well. And I really recommend, if you enjoyed this show, to please pass it along, share it with friends, and keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.